You know, most people would agree at this point the most important relationship in this town is now the one between you and the president. Talk about what that relationship is like from your point of view and how you think it evolves now.
Well, we don't have any personal difficulties. In fact, I've negotiated, but some would argue the only bipartisan agreements that we've had with this administration have all been done by the Vice President and myself. And of course, the Vice President was not a free agent. He was allowed to do so by the President. The 2-year extension of the Bush tax cuts in December 2010, the Budget Control Act in August of 2011, the fiscal cliff deal in New Year's Eve of 2012 were all bipartisan negotiations. So I don't have any fundamental problem with negotiating with the other side. And we don't have any personal problems. There is, however, a deep philosophical difference. I mean, if you look at the way the president's reacted to what could only be described as a butt-kicking election, you know, maybe you could explain away us winning red states with Senate races. How do you explain the governor of Maryland, the governor of Massachusetts, the governor of Illinois? By any objective standard, the president got crushed in this election. So I've been perplexed by the reaction since the election, a sort of in-your-face, dramatic move to the left. So I don't know what we can expect in terms of reaching bipartisan agreements. That's my first choice, to look for the things that we actually agree on, if there are any. At least on trade, I think there's a potential for agreement. Trade agreements are more popular in my conference than there are in the Democratic conference. Comprehensive tax reform, we all think it ought to be done. So far, the president's view has been that he wants $1 trillion ransom to do it. In other words, he wants $1 trillion in CBO scorable revenue for the federal government as a condition to do comprehensive tax reform, which Reagan and Tip O'Neill agreed would be revenue neutral to the government, at least from a Congressional Budget Office point of view. We're not going to pay $1 trillion ransom to do something that would make the country more competitive. Certainly need to do it, we want to do it, but are not going to, under any circumstances, give this administration $1 trillion more in revenue as a condition for doing it.
So to the people in this room who want corporate tax reform, what do you tell them the chances are that you get from here to there in the next 2 years?
Well, I would tell all of you to lobby the president to agree with us what the purpose of this all is, to make America more competitive. You know, they've already gotten plenty of tax increases. I mean, we've had a tutorial here in the last 6 years over spending, borrowing, taxing, and over-regulation. On the front page of your paper today, points out how much regular Americans have fallen behind. We know this stuff doesn't work. We've had an experiment here for 6 long years. If the president wants to make the country more competitive, the single best thing he could do would be comprehensive tax reform. You notice I keep saying comprehensive. It will be tricky, if not impossible, to convince my members that C-Corps, which is probably all of you, get a rate down here, and pass-throughs get a rate up here. So I think there are 2 things that we really ought to have an understanding about at the beginning: that large and small businesses should be treated the same, and that it ought to be revenue neutral to the government. If we have those kinds of understandings before we start down this path, I think we can get there.